everyone. We are recording this, and it's lovely to have so many folks on this Zoom chat. I'm Dr. Fran Bisselle, head of school here at Hathaway Brown, joined by Sharon Baker, the fearless director of the middle school. And let me just tell you, she totally loves Eats, Sleeps, and Breathes Middle School, loves middle school. And it's just brilliant to see her in action. And 40 Minutes with Fran was started probably 2 or 3 years ago. A little bit of a deep dive into some area of school to let alums from our Alumni Association kind of sponsors this, let alums understand what's going on today. I mean, HB today, it should be different and is different from HB of yesterday, as we're always iterating and trying to be the best version of ourselves, modeling for our students. We want them to be the best version of themselves as well. And today's conversation is on social and emotional learning, SEL for short. And it's something actually, Sharon and I have been working nationally on SEL, specifically in middle school. And we're really excited to kind of give you a little bit of, what's out there nationally and what kind of research and work we're doing to better teach and better understand students. And Sharon, why would you say SEL is so important in, let's just say, middle school?
I think, in life, certainly as adults, we're not that much different than middle schoolers, right? And I always laugh that middle schoolers are basically toddlers, but taller. And, humans, girls especially, lead with relationships. They lead with emotions. They lead with, all of the components that go into making up who we are, our personalities, our resilience, our grit, our emotions, all of those pieces. That's where we enter a room. That's how we start ourselves. And so everything else has to kind of build on that foundation. So if we're teaching math and world geography and French and arts and all of these pieces, we have to really remember, we don't have to remember, but we're going to be so much more successful if we start with what is the foundation of these children, who's extremely, extremely sensitive, but doesn't want anyone to know she's sensitive, who is really struggling with where she fits in the family dynamic, who's having the worst day ever. If they get out of the car in the morning and they slam the door and, the car peels away, that they started their Monday in a really terrible way, right? And so her first period class might not be her best self because she's entering with this baggage. And so that emotional component of who our students are, who our humans are, really is so important. It's foundational. It's not like the extra on the outside, it's the heart and the core of what we're working with. And so I think that is, once you harness that and you can unlock that, everything else becomes so much more achievable.
Right. And certainly you have to understand self to understand others. And so philosophically, we have things in, early childhood called conscious discipline, which basically is to understand how you as a little one, you have big emotions, how you can interact with somebody who stole your toy, right? And then you add a layer in primary school where you talk about respect and responsibility. And you talk about empathy, and understanding that concept of empathy for others includes also self-compassion, self-empathy. And then of course, middle school, it's all identity work there, right? And confidence. And your peers become more important developmentally at that moment than your parents. And so these SEL kind of skills that we build become even more important to a child's experience. And if that child feels confident and feels like their experience socially is going well in a classroom, listen, academically, they're going to fly really high. I mean, that's just such a big part of how they feel. And so, so much of our advisory program and our mentor program focus on how do we teach students to understand self in order to understand others and make good decisions, which is important. And Sharon, tell me a little bit about kind of maybe the middle school, the biggest growth from 5th grade to 8th grade. I mean, you say they're toddlers and but taller. toddler, 2-year-olds transform, right? You walk when you want, you talk when you do, this little thing that kind of all of a sudden has vocabulary and builds sentences and such. We see similar incredible exponential growth from 5th to 8th grade. Tell us a little bit about the social and emotional growth that you and your team channel during those years.
Sure. So 5th graders, we're talking 10 and 11 years old, but yet in the middle school. So we liken them very often to puppies. They are so much interested in pleasing. That is really, they want to please their friends. They want to very much please their teachers. They very much want to please their parents. They want to know that what they're doing is right. And so they benefit from modeling. They benefit from practice. They're learning. They love to do schoolwork. They're so curious and they just want to know why and how everything works a certain way. And they're still really concrete. They're still very much wanting to play on the playground. They're still very much, motivated by, that was a great job. You did such a nice job. That like opens up their whole world. And then 6th grade, they become a little more adolescent. That preteen really is very important. And so friendship in 6th grade, in 5th grade, they're kind of in these tripods. And so we're the 3 best friends, the 3 of us together, we're together. And then in 6th grade, they sort of become a little more, I call them amoebas, and their social circles start to become more important to them, or equally important to them, I should say, is how they're doing in their classes. They still very much want to be pleasers. They still very much benefit from positive feedback, but they also are very interested in being friends with people. And this is my group. And so we go from having, 2 or 3 kids sitting at tables together to 7 or 8 kids sitting at tables together, and they overlap. The groups kind of morph in and out and they overlap as they're figuring out who they are. And then in 7th grade, I call 7th grade the armpit of adolescence. It's 3. So 7th graders are 13. So they're 3-year-olds, right? And so like terrible 2s, not that terrible. A 3-nager, on the other hand, that is a 7th grader. So they are angsty and they lead with negativity and they are very extreme in their thinking. I failed. As opposed to, I'd have gotten a B- on that test, right? It's an F. It's the worst thing ever. They will often in their casual language be very, very extreme. She hates me. They yelled at me. Well, no, nobody hates you. I mean, I'm starving. It's like this extreme language that 7th graders use. And they have this very, we've been talking so much about this year, Fran, this very polarized thinking, right? And so it's like, I have 8 hours of homework and I had to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning. And also I need to get A+, right? So they're just very polarized in their thinking and very angsty, and their social worlds, actually their social circles become smaller. So it becomes very much about who's included and who's excluded, right? That's very 7th grade. And then 8th grade, I mean, it's like you're seeing young women develop overnight. I mean, they get very tall in 8th grade, but they also walk with their shoulders back and they walk with their heads looking forward, and 7th graders walk looking down. This is fascinating. If you come into school and go on a tour in the middle school, you can spot a 7th grader because they're looking down at their feet when they walk. 8th graders look straight ahead. And they walk with this purpose and confidence, and they're so interested in understanding, they want to know why the world works a certain way. They want to know how to fix it. So they're very interested in the big problems of the world. They're very confident that they can fix all the big problems of the world. And they want to know, they're very curious about the adults in their space. And why do you think that way? What do you think about this controversial topic, and why do you think that way? And they like that sort of debate and that curiosity of figuring out, how did you get to this way? And do I want to be that way? Because I want to follow that same path. It's fascinating to watch, and they really do settle into themselves in a way that you can see them ready to take on the world. They don't know what's coming yet, but they're ready. They're like so excited and ready for it. It's very interesting in a very different way than 5th graders who are just excited about everything. Just everything, like pasta for lunch, Yay. Eighth graders are like, okay, pasta, let's go next. I mean, it's very, very different what pleases them.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny, Dr. Zaki, who is that psychologist who came to speak The War for Kindness, talked a lot about seventh grade being the ultimate conformity age. You know, research wise, they all want to kind of fit in. It's how do I fit in? How do I kind of make those connections? And you're right, eighth grade is, wait, I want to be myself. I have something to share. I have something different to share, and whatever that difference that becomes that confidence happens then. You know, brain development wise, middle school and SEL is really an important part too, because you know that corpus callosum kind of connects in your brain in sixth grade, which allows you on average it's sixth grade, but which allows you the ability to think abstractly, which is why you can't really introduce algebra or X's and Y's, abstract math too early. The idea of what is independence, which is an abstract concept, and what's the responsibility thereof. This is very much a middle school or SEL, to understand the abstractions of what is compassion and how do you care. It could be very tangible in fifth grade, but when you get to be in eighth grade and you're thinking about global citizenship and caring, those are the things that they can really get their head around and be inspired by. So much transition in middle school, which I think is beautiful to see and beautiful to watch young girls become women. And that's such a precious time. Sharon, I've been really excited about the work you and I have done that really thinks about intersecting academics and SEL. And just for folks who are listening, you know, one of the things for many years, the academic community has debated, should you spend time on social and emotional learning, or is academic time more precious? And we can push our kids and have them grow academically. SEL will happen. And what the community has in their research over the last probably 5 to 7 years discovered is actually you can improve academic performance when you teach social and emotional skills. And one of the things that Sharon and I have been working with the Educational Record Bureau, which is a international nonprofit that seeks to provide insights into teaching and learning, they developed a test or a way to measure social and emotional strengths and weaknesses. And of course, they have many tests that measure academic strengths and weaknesses. And so one of the things that we've done is how do we fuse these two different measurements together to really provide insight into a middle school learner. So Sharon, you want to explain a little bit about what we've been doing with ERB?
Yes, it's really such an interesting project. So, you know, in 5th and 7th grade, we give standardized tests to sort of help us measure our own curriculum. And it's math and 2 different kinds of math and writing and reading comprehension, vocabulary, et cetera. And then the 8th graders take the 8-9 PSAT, which has very similar information, right? Math, vocabulary, reading comprehension. And 6th graders have sort of this cognitive abilities test, which is kind of akin to an IQ test. So we've got this data, which is really helpful and fruitful, and we use it for lots of different ways. We layered in for all 4 grade levels this SEL questionnaire. It's a self-assessment. It asks questions that are targeting those sort of social awareness, self-awareness, identity development, stress management, executive functions, all those kinds of CASEL skills. And so they answer questions, and that information is incredibly valuable to us. I mean, we watch it as the students are answering all the questions. We can watch the data come in live, and it's fascinating because we can say, oh my gosh, they're feeling very stressed today. What's happening today? They're reporting that they have high stress levels today. But the layering and the intersection of those 2 seemingly distinct data sets has been really fascinating for the teachers to think about how to unlock even higher academic achievement. So for example, we know from students, because they self-report this data to us, that they feel they prefer to collaborate in groups. They prefer it. And then there are a set of students who prefer much more. They rate themselves much higher in independence. Like they're much more, they're introverts. They prefer independence. They like to work at their own pace. They don't necessarily consider themselves risk takers. So they don't want to check their work with other people because they're afraid they might be wrong. Two different kinds of learners, right? So our math teachers will say, all right, so I have, let's say Sharon rates herself as a collaborator. She really likes to work with others. And she is really struggling based on the information we got from her CTP in math. Like that quantitative information came back lower. We were really surprised. So what if we help put her math learning in a more collaborative environment, because that's where she feels she is stronger, and target that with where she feels weaker in her academic achievements. And will that help? Will that increase the way in which she's able to access the content, access the information? And it does. So if we match sort of those where they self-identify, this is who I am as a learner, and we match that to a particular teaching method, particularly where we see that that's where they academically are struggling, where there's obstacles there, we actually are showing significant improvement in those academic realms. It's really fascinating. It works the other way as well. So it works where if you have a kid who self-identifies as a really independent learner, and she's a phenom in reading comprehension, right? We can even push her even farther if we have her doing sort of some of the work solo, right? Because she can get farther. She maybe is reading a different text because we know she's an independent learner. Let's give her an opportunity to read a different text to push her even farther because she can achieve even more. So it's this really fascinating intersection of, you'd think it would be obvious and make sense right away, but what's happening is when you really look at the students and how they see themselves, and you match that to how they learn and intake information, what you get is higher academic achievement. So of course the SEL impacts academic achievement, but the connection between the two, if you're really intentional about the way that you match it, you really can unlock for the students so much more capacity.
Yeah. And it's important that it's self-identification, right? Because
Yes.
Adults, we might perceive a seventh grader as, wow, she's really good at group work, but she may perceive herself as not that. Right. So I think that, there's something to be said about when you're trusting a child's self-perception and then allowing them to enter into a conversation about kind of strengths and weaknesses from that perspective versus how adults perceive it. And I think that's really an important piece of how your team has empowered girls. That feels very empowering to a girl, to feel like their voice matters in their learning processes. And at every level we see at HB trying to really harness the energy of that is social and emotionally it's an amazing empowerment moment.
Well, it's
which is
interesting
great
too, because you can track it. Now we've been doing this now this is our 5th year. And to see how the data changes or doesn't change over time. So how the 5th graders think about and rate themselves as a group around the idea of stress, and how the 8th graders rate themselves as a group around stress, and how the 5th graders identify themselves as empaths versus how 8th graders identify themselves as empaths. And I think what's interesting too, when we talk with the students about this, is the self-identification is so important because they change over time. So,
right.
They might have said, I'm a great collaborator when I'm in 5th grade because I love everybody and I like to have fun in class. And then by the time they get to 8th grade, they realize, collaborator, yeah, I like to have friends and I like to have a good time in school, but when it's schoolwork time, no. Now I rate myself this way. And so thinking they actually will change in that identity development. Right. They change how they perceive themselves as a student, as a person, as a friend, obviously all the time, but significantly in these 4 years. And that's been something that's interesting when we have conversations with the students about what is the data showing us? How are you feeling? This is what we're seeing. This was a question we had, and to have these dialogues with students has been incredibly empowering for them to understand, like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't really realize that about myself or my peers.
Right. And
Might I say something? Fran,
Sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's Louise Butler, class of 1980, a long time ago. Pleasure to be on this call. One of the things that comes to mind to me is that this type of study and progressive evaluation is a very differentiating factor as it looks at the young women that are then going on into their college environment. And is there a way that we can be talking about that with their prospective universities and colleges? Because as a person who's been on the boards of other colleges and universities, this is not done. This is very unique. It's very breakthrough in the way that you're looking at these young women and evaluating them in a way that is, of course, very important to them personally, but also looking at it to say, I know who I am and I know how I can be successful as I go forward. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want us to lose the point that here it is yet again, and I'm very proud of you and all hail HB, that you're doing something that I feel is very differentiating.
Yeah. Louise, I really appreciate that perspective. One of my dear friends is Dr. Adam Weinberg, who is the president of Denison. And he just wrote a great article, and Misty, remind me to send it to everybody. He just wrote it recently about kind of who are the students in college today and what can we do better when they get there. And he doesn't talk about teacups, but that's kind of what many of the college presidents talk about. Don't send us teacups, meaning too many breakable kids. Like this idea of resilience or self-knowledge about your emotions. Really, really critical to that independence that you have when you get to be in college. And backward by design, when we know who we're going to send to colleges and what they need to do from them, we really look at that middle school experience as pivotal and really anchoring to this confidence that then they can become. And I would say, Sharon, one of the things I think you and your team do really well is that a student leaves middle school feeling that they have social and emotional skills that can be improved. They're not traits, right? They're not saying I am more empathetic than somebody else, but I can work on my empathy. I can work on my executive functioning, or I'm always so disorganized. It's not a stagnant thing, right? They have seen themselves improve or their voice be important to the improvement process. And that kind of idea that it's a skill I can lean into. And Louise, talking about that, one of the things, another research piece that Sharon has worked on so well is how do we have middle schoolers succeed or understand social networking and tech, right? And the internet and, all that stuff. And can you tell a little bit about the program that you've been using, Sharon, on that front, because that certainly is preparation for college, or certainly how teenagers see themselves.
Oh, definitely. And I think, as we all have learned, colleges and beyond, employers are constantly looking at the ways in which young people are navigating the online environment, the tech environment, and nobody is worse at that than middle schoolers. They find themselves in more trouble than not in trouble. And so this is something that we really wanted to kind of figure it out, because we were having just so many wild issues trying to stay ahead of what they were doing which is impossible. So you have, like you were saying, you have to go at the skills, not at like today it's Be Real. Remember when it was Pokemon Go and Snapchat was, everything changes so quickly and we can't keep up with it, right? So we have to talk to them, not about the tech, but about this is the worlds in which you are navigating. So how are you collaborating in an online environment? How are you portraying yourself? How are you thinking about it? Who are you following? How are you impacting your own sort of mental health by the choices you make online? So we had a task force of 4 or 5 teachers from around the building to just do research. What's out there? What do we need to know? What do we not know? What do we, that we should need to figure out? And we landed on this, this program called the Social Institute. And so the DePietros, I have 2 DePietros in my division right this year for the first time. They funded this 3-year partnership with the Social Institute. And the whole philosophy was one that flipped the way we had been talking about tech and social media with our students. So, we, like most parents, had been, this is bad, you're spending too much time, you got in trouble, we're taking it away. And it was somewhat effective, but it wasn't super effective. And so the Social Institute completely flipped it. And it's how to win at social. So of course there are pitfalls in social media and technology. Of course there are obstacles. Of course there are bad choices. That's life. It's no different than in the classroom or in your bedroom, right? How do you win at it? And so how do you harness it for its good? How do you, instead of talking about like online bullying, how do you flip that and say, how do you go out and do good online? How do you make someone's day online? How do you impact positively? How do you, instead of following people who make you feel bad about yourself, who look perfect and they're filtered, and then you look at them and you think, I don't look like that. Well, stop following that person, or keep following that person, and also follow 2 more people who are just like you, who are athletes and who are dancers and artists. And so they stopped vilifying it and they started saying, okay, here are the obstacles, and how are we gonna win at it? Because it's so powerful and it has so many great things. And that has been really incredible for us. And it's been helpful for us as adults to think about, all right, instead of vilifying this and making it us versus them, how can we get them on our team? So now, we can talk with the students about, okay, so Be Real is this new app and it has lots of great things, right? It has this idea of like, remove the filter, stop curating your content and making it look like you have a perfect life. We know that's not the case. And so that sparks wonderful conversations. Sure, there are some pitfalls, right? You could put someone on your page that doesn't want to be on your page. You could have something, have a really bad day and feel really bad about it. Sure, there are pitfalls, but how do you win at that? And it has been really helpful at having conversations around how can we help you do the very best of this. Plus, our girls, anytime you say how to win at something, they're all in. They want to win at it.
All in.
They're all in.
Right.
So, and then moving on into high school, they talk about, how to manage your social media so that the billboard that is out there for colleges, for employers, for internships is showing all of the really wonderful things about yourself. And how can you represent yourself authentically in this really great light? Because our girls are doing such incredible things. Absolutely share that about yourself. And how do you do that in a way that is really to who you are, playing to your core, like who you are as a human. And that has been really great. And I think, we always talk about balance. And so whenever we show them how to use their devices, so that you can see how much time you spend on all of these different things. We don't say, look, you spent, 8 hours on YouTube last week. That's crazy. We say, oh, did you know you spent 8 hours on YouTube? What are you looking at? And, and they often will say, I didn't know I was looking at anything. Oh, I fell asleep to, this music or this movie. And it's just, like you said, it's this self-awareness that makes them, feel really empowered, and then they feel really confident because they know so much. And then we are able to have these really interesting conversations with them. Okay, now that you know that, now what's next?
Right. I mean, the algorithms on these, on these channels are programmed to fear or anxiety The more you're there, the more fearful and more anxious you're going to be. And you kind of deconstruct it. You may demystify it. And then they're like, wait, I know I'm being a pawn in this. And you have a 13-year-old who understands self and thus understands algorithms. She's going to approach it so differently. And I think your team's done a great job. And certainly that program, I love the program because it also harnesses leadership. So those 8th graders preview the lessons and say, that'll fly, that's cool, or that's not going to work, and so there's some input into the curriculum from the students themselves. Again, that empowerment moment.
And I like the fact that you're also stratifying it relating to race or gender, because we're in the climate that we're in, and a lot of young women are classifying themselves differently. Some are classified just as a person of color or a him, her, whatever have you, LGBTQ, etc. I just like the fact that it's very inclusive. Yes. And I think that having that kind of conversation makes it easier for the young women to have conversation with you. That's a two-way. It's not like dictating down, because that's what we've had historically. And now it's more of a discourse. Yes. This is who I am, and how can you help me with the things, the topics that might be of import to me as I'm growing and developing as a young woman. And I really appreciate that you're doing that.
Yeah, Louise, they talk a lot today about what's called Bisselle, which is DEI and SEL, and that thought of identity and understanding self in social and emotional really being kind of the ultimate insight provider to students. So there's a lot of research out there on Bisselle, it's called, which is the fancy acronym for it all. But gosh, Sharon and I can talk all day about this. As you can tell, we're quite passionate about the research we're doing and the successes we're seeing. But we welcome questions or thoughts on your mind. Or Louise, thanks for your thoughts. But anybody else would want to have a question or a thought? Yes, we have something from the chat. I was curious to know if the students in the upper school also take the self-assessment test. Great question. So they do not take the self-assessment test. So much of that SEL test has really been geared towards middle school, or more specifically 4th through 9th grade. A lot of the tests that the upper school take are the PSATs and the SATs and, all of those kinds of tests. So there's a little less data on SEL. Having said that, the Board of Trustees built their own survey to talk about what does a thriving and flourishing upper school student at HB look like. And there are 40 questions. And some of those questions are, I have someone to sit with at lunch. I have at least one trusted adult in the community. I participate in a fellowship. And we've given that survey out for the last 3-4 years. And that really, we also ask demographic questions. So race, we ask socioeconomic status or their perceived socioeconomic status. And so we want to be able to intersect, can everybody at HB, no matter what your demographic kind of outlook be, can everybody thrive and flourish? And if we're missing a group, why? And how we can reach that group better. And so while that's not SEL, it is a measurement that reflects, I think, some of the same values that SEL has about caring and are we a good community. Liz, I think you said you have a question. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask.
Yes, I have a question. Are we able to Be Real as alum? Be Real.
I didn't hear it. Say it one more time.
Access Be Real as alum.
Oh, so I think anybody can act. It's not just a HB thing. Be Real is a national or international app on your phone, and you can. I think it's like Snapchat or any of the other kind of cool and hip apps that are on your phone. But this is the most popular one in middle school.
Thank you.
Yes. Our next question is, are these 40 Minutes with Fran used as core articles in the alum communication? You know, we're trying with 40 Minutes with Fran, and gosh, any suggestions about other topics we can hit on. I think we use these 40 Minutes with Frans as a wonderful dynamic conversation with alums, is what's going on today. I think things at HB today are incredibly positive and incredibly forward-looking with girls' education, which probably may be a little different from when some alums were here. So we're excited to show off, but some of our best ideas come from alums. And so, you know, many times this is a network that we're using you too. Hey, I heard at another school that there was a great SEL program, or, hey, I want to know a little bit more about college counseling. Can you do a 40 Minutes with Fran on college counseling? And I think we have these transcripts, or at least these Zoom videos, somewhere on our website. So folks who want to know more about what's going on at HB today, I think that's what we've been using these for. But I just, again, feel so privileged and honored to be a part of the HB world, because truly women championing women and knowing what girls' education is like today and what other people are seeing out there is part of the magic of how HB is so great today, is because our alums care and share. So anything you see, we just love to hear, and that's so helpful.
Fran, I'll jump in for 1 second. This video will be on the HB website. If you go to hb.edu/alumni/virtual events, we will have it there. And the Alumni Council will be providing me some ideas of what our topics should be for our next 40 Minutes with Fran. But if anybody on this call has ideas, we are open to hearing everything. So feel free to email me anytime, and we'll add it to the list of topics we might discuss.
The only thing that I wanted to just share, thank you very much, and I'm sorry to be such a loudmouth on this call. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, but I am a loudmouth. Is to be thinking forward about HBCU outreach for our young ladies as they look at college options. I know a lot of those colleges, I would say, like the Spelmans, especially Howard, are looking to try to get wonderful output of young ladies into their environment. And they don't have to be, some of them are diverse, but they don't have to be diverse. And so I would just say, if they can be thinking about including them in our college conversations, especially as we're looking at recruiting, that could be helpful to our young women.
That's great. I think we did have a few students in the last 4 or 5 years.
I did see that.
HBCUs,
I mean, I just had a daughter graduate from Howard. I'm sure HB has too. So I just wanted to just throw that in as something to think about. But thank you very much. I'm sorry to be a loudmouth.
No, you're welcome. It made me think, Sharon, as we kind of wrap this up, one of my favorite conversations with a 5th grader happened last year with Marianne Christian. And I was asking her about the difference between 4th grade and 5th grade. And I said, so what do you like best about 5th grade? I think she kind of looked down, and I think she really did like her uniform, although she was with a friend, so she would never say that. But what she did say was, I like getting grades. And I thought that was really interesting, that she in 5th grade wanted to know how she was doing, right? So it wasn't so much that she wanted to get all A's, although I'm sure there's a lot of HB girls that giggle and that's their goal. But the idea that you could track yourself over time, and that being achievement over time, being an important piece of the kind of academician she wanted to be perceived as. Was really an interesting piece. Are you seeing that maybe in the 5th graders this year too?
We were just talking about this at the 5th grade parent coffee yesterday about, it is the first time they get grades. And so we work really hard with them to understand what grades mean, that it's not a comment on your value as a student or your value as a person. It's not good and bad person, but this is how it's a comment maybe on how you prepared for that particular test, or maybe it's a comment on how well or not you understood a particular topic, and to use it as a point of information. And then what do you do with that information is what we really care about. So even if you got 100% on your vocabulary test, we're very proud of you. What can we learn from that? How did you study? Maybe make sure that was you log that as a great study tool. Or, did you study for an hour for a 10-point test? Maybe we challenge ourselves to study more efficiently and still see if we can get a 10 point. So we talk a lot about that with the 5th graders, because they do really want to know how to use this information. And they often can, inadvertently, especially girls, we know this about that, use that as a judgment or a value statement on who they are as people. So we try to disassociate that.
Yeah. Well, you and your team do an incredible work. And I always enjoy our conversations on middle school and the magic thereof. And, of all the things I'm most proud of, I would say I am deeply proud of how we teach social and emotional learning, because character matters most. And so much of these girls here, when they leave, we want them to understand that their power as a rising leader in this world, to rise boldly to the challenge, includes leadership, and leadership includes social and emotional learning, and really anchors people. And it's just something I'm really proud of. HB's done that well for a long time, and glad to be a part of a community that is so dedicated to that. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Sharon, for taking time out of your busy day. And Missy and Tina, what a great celebration of alums to have this conversation with so many dynamic women. And thank you all.
Have a great day.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great day. Take
Bye.
care.